D.L. Hughley is the legendary comedian and activist. In his stage routines and social commentary, there's almost no place that D.L. won't go. He has a brand new book out. Its title is How Not to Get Shot and Other Advice from White People. I talked to D.L. recently about the book, race relations in the United States, and politics. Here's that interview. Watch. Okay, a recent NBC News poll showed a majority of Americans, more than 6 in 10, believe racism remains a major problem.
Sure.
The President's National Commission on Civil Disorders, known as the Kerner Commission, I interviewed Governor Kerner when that came out 50 years ago. And that report said, 50 years ago, our nation is moving toward two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. That was 50 years ago.
Well, a lot has changed because now we throw the Mexicans in there with us, so it's...
Was the Kerner Commission right?
Absolutely. Well, I think we refuse to see things as they are, and I think that we are all subject to our own vantage points, but I think that the idea that if you look at African-American males in the 70s, they're virtually the same as in the 70s, they're virtually the same as they are now. There's been virtually no movement. In terms of African-American wealth, a percentage of the wealth of America, we're just below where apartheid South Africa was. So obviously we're not moving forward.
All right, now tell me, with the election of Obama, which we all hailed,
Sure.
we did a lot of time on the air together on CNN. 8 years he served, elected, re-elected.
Sure.
Why didn't things change?
Because that's ultimately it's like expecting one thing to move a country that is so entrenched in this way.
We're saying a racist country elected a black man.
We're saying, well, most white people didn't elect Barack Obama. It was a collaborative effort between the others. It was a lot of blacks, a lot of Latins, a lot of Asians, a lot of gays. So it wasn't
A lot of women.
A lot of women. And I think if you look at it, he proportionately he didn't get the white vote nor the Hillary Clinton. And I think there's a way that we see the world. I mean, even if you look at what's happening right now, there are people who like. If you look at the past 2 years, you've seen what was said about the Muslims and the Mexicans, and you've seen what's done to the Puerto Ricans, and you see, children in cages, and there are people in America that still thinks that that's the pathway to making us great, and I don't know that that is.
Something's always boggled me. I don't know if you'll have the answer.
Probably not. I'm just a comic.
Prejudice is so stupid.
Yes.
Because it means to prejudge.
Right.
All right. Since it's stupid, it's morally stupid, economically stupid. The South had to build 2 bathrooms when they could have built 1.
Right.
Why don't we get rid of it?
Because
Why is it still instilled?
Because some people have to have it. Some people have to feel superior. When you look at what happens, I don't have a problem with somebody having a bigoted viewpoint or a prejudiced viewpoint. I do mind when that person is in a position to wield that kind of vantage point over other people. Like, if you're going to be prejudiced, you shouldn't be a police officer, you should be a judge, you shouldn't be a congressman. You can be as bigoted, and I think you should be able to eat and have your opinion, but it's when those prejudices work their way into legislation and when they work its way into how we're policed and how we're governed, then we have a problem. Because I don't think you're going to ever find a way to make people morally on one accord, but there are ways to avoid having, so there should be certain disqualifiers.
Do you think we have a prejudiced president?
Of course. Of course, and I think that anybody who doesn't is either naive or deliberately obtuse.
All right, after being lobbied by Kim Kardashian, President Trump commuted the life sentence of Alice Johnson.
Sure.
Alice is an African-American woman, more than 2 decades in prison for nonviolent drug offenses. Sure. Why did a racist president do that?
Because he wanted to look like I mean, what did John Wooden say? Don't confuse activity with accomplishment. You can look at Alice Johnson, and certainly that's commendable. But look at the policy. Look at the judges he's put in place. The judges he's put in place. These are judges that are going to make the sentencing for black people that much more harsh. That many more black people are going to jail specifically because of the judges that he put in place, specifically because what Sessions is doing. So you can, we used to call that, when you want me to look over here while you're doing this over there, that's not governing, that's three-card mining. So I think that it was great that he appeared to do something, and Alice Johnson, certainly, I'm glad, but he's creating myriads more of them.
What's your book about?
It is, well, it's called How Not to Get Shot and Other Advice from White People. I remember I'd gone on Megyn Kelly shortly after the Philando Castile shooting. And we were there to talk about police injustice and brutality and how we can make things better. And before I walked out, she had Mark Furman on before me, unbeknownst to me. Now, this is the purview this is from where we start a conversation about policing and police brutality and the negative interaction in the community. We start with Mark Furman, who was the poster boy for all that's wrong with policing. But she didn't get that it was wrong, and she went on to tell me how Philando Castile would be alive if he just done what the police officer said, if he hadn't done this and complained about it later. And so I decided to write because I think the only way society ever gets anything is if you're not so on the nose, if you're satirical about it. But so I decided to write a book with all the advice, and then it's actual quotes from people, what they said, like of Geraldo when he said, well, if you dress like a thug, you'll be treated like a thug. It's from Bill O'Reilly. It's Megyn Kelly, of course.
The book, by the way, is How Not to Get Shot and Other Advice from White People. It's a fact book.
It is.
Actual quotes.
These are actual quotes, actual statistics, But we try to tell them how, since white people have been telling us how to act when we got off the boat originally. So I think that they're experts. They don't seem to get shot unarmed.
It's amazing. Some people see a white cop chase a black guy, shoot him in the back, and make excuse for that.
Sure. You ever notice how if a suspect does something, then the video is all you ever need, but if a cop does something to a suspect, we don't know what happened before this. Like one gets a presumption of innocence and one gets a presumption of guilt. And so it's not an indictment of society, but it is an inspection of it.
What's your reaction to the family separation issue?
America's, like I said earlier, they separated slaves. They separated World War II. They had 700,000 Italians interned, a million or so, over a million Japanese. No, it was Italian too. 700,000. Yes, there were 700,000 Italians interned. There were a million or so, a little over a million or so Japanese interned. So America separating people of color from their children, like I said earlier, isn't new, it's retro.
Sad.
It's funny because I can't understand how it doesn't see. We seem to always find ourselves in a place where we're demonstratively wrong, and we don't seem to ever be able to learn our lesson.
According to a new book by a close advisor to Barack Obama, Obama wondered that if he became president, maybe he became president 20 years too early.
Maybe.
Might you agree with that?
Maybe.
The book is The World as It Is by Ben Rhodes.
Maybe. I think I don't know. Have you ever noticed that every time somebody black does something they never did before, there's always death threats? I don't care if it's the first baseball player. I don't care if it's the first student. I don't care if it's the first athlete, the first president, the first policeman, the first basketball player. Anytime somebody black does something first, the reaction by a lot of Americans is they want to kill them. And so I don't know that 20 years would kind of assuage that kind of anger. So I don't know, but I know this, that I am glad that my children have seen these things in their lifetime. And I think that what happened to a lot of people I know is that they thought that this was kind of an arrival. And I think we now know that America was just, this was the play goes on, and this was the intermission.
Well, American media did react. Look at Roseanne Barr, how quickly ABC reacted to her fiasco.
But why was she ever hired? Roseanne was the same Roseanne, and now she says stuff like, "I didn't know it was an ape." Well, you called another black woman an ape in 2013, and to blame it on Ambien. I mean, I can see NyQuil make you hate black people, but Ambien.
In 2018, you were very successful, very well-known. Right now, 2018, you're successful, well-known, I'm sure you make good money. There's places where you, D.L. Hughley, feel unwelcome.
Sure. Well, in my neighborhood, I've lived in Calabasas 17 years. My wife and I were jogging around the lake. They called the police. They came out. They saw a black guy with tattoos.
You were jogging around?
On the lake. First, they asked us for our passes that you all have to have, which seems weird to me to ask a black dude for his passes, but that was just a whole weird thing. But
Passes?
you have to have these passes they give to walk, to prove you're a resident. So we watched everybody run by. They asked us for our passes, and they did this every day for a while. The same guard, same. And so one day I'm like, man, you're not asking anybody else to do it. They call the police. It was a big thing. My children have all been stopped. I've lived in the same neighborhood 17 years. As a matter of fact, I was the first person that lived on my street. And so I can tell you this. I don't know any black person that hasn't had a negative interaction with the authorities or someone in their immediate surroundings. I don't know anyone. Now, I'm not saying they haven't had positive interaction. I'm saying that I don't know anyone that hasn't had a negative one.
It boggles me because it's so dumb.
It is. It's inconvenient, too.
It gets it over. And recently you spoke very candidly about your past mistreatment of your wife.
Sure.
You had multiple affairs.
Sure.
Did you come out with that? Did you come forward?
Well, somebody else was going to, so I might as well have done it, yeah.
How do you look back at that, at your own? That's not black and white.
Well, no, it is kind of black and white. I failed morally. I made a promise I didn't keep. I said and did things that I'm deeply ashamed of, and I don't know that I changed because I had a change of heart. I think you kind of run out of wind. I think you want to do the things you used to do before, you're just not capable of them. So that's, I just, at a certain age, you stop lying.
Get tired.
You just,
you don't have to remember.
Yeah. So I don't want to.
Are you happy now? Is everything okay?
Happiness is overrated. I don't think happiness. I think happiness is like Hawaii, but most of us live in Bakersfield. So I think it's a vacation spot, not a destination. But I am content. I am more than content. I'm clear. So I think that
Is your marriage okay?
Oh yeah. Well, I adore my wife. I'm very much in love with her. I can't speak for her, but she still comes home every night. So
How many children do you have?
I have 3.
Grown up?
Well, I guess the law says they're grown up, but my accountant says they're not. So, I got 3 millennials. By all accounts, they're supposed to be the most educated generation that ever existed. Mm-hmm. I paid for them to graduate from college. I paid for my wife to graduate from college. I got a GED, but I'm the only one working. So,
Dick Gregory, great comedian.
Absolutely.
I knew Dick well. Interviewed him many times. He passed away last year.
Yep.
Yet he was as funny as hell. Still, he got hate mail and stuff.
Yeah.
Dick Gregory.
Yeah.
Do we have a Dick Gregory today?
I don't know that it was the times that made those people so indelible, and so I think we can have one, but I think we things are so much different now. Like Muhammad Ali, in addition to being a great boxer and a great humanitarian, he had to have the surroundings that kind of exemplify those things. And I don't know that we have them that way because I think people obfuscate a lot. There are things that are right and there are things that are wrong. And even when something's wrong, most people know it internally. Our ids tell us they're wrong. Most people nowadays seem to have the uncanny ability to cut off their moral compass. They have the uncanny ability to do it. If I see a human being treated in a certain way, there's something internally but people have this mechanism where they can shut it off. And so I think that in order to relate to a Dick Gregory or for him to kind of be heard, people have to be tuned to that frequency, and I think they're not now.
Do you ever sit down and talk with bigots?
Sure. Sure. Usually when I'm pulled over. But there's a one-sided conversation. Listen, I'm not trying to sway people to my perspective. I'm really not. I'm not trying to develop sycophants. To me, the whole point of the book was to be, like I said, not an indictment, but an inspection of society. I think that there are things that happen in America that have always happened. Like this whole notion of black-on-black crime. Crime is not, there is a notion that crime is inherent in a certain race. Crime is about proximity. You kill what you're around. 90% of black people kill black people. 87% of white people kill white people. Asians kill Asians. Latins kill Latins. Husbands kill wives. Wives kill husbands.
Most murders are
intimate.
passion.
And so it isn't that the biggest indicator of crime is not race, it's poverty. It isn't that neighborhoods are bad because they filled with black people. It's they're bad because they're filled with poor black people.
There was a lot of crime in Irish neighborhoods,
Absolutely.
Italian neighborhoods
Absolutely.
in New York.
Absolutely. But people, it's like this whole thing, like this whole notion where somebody talks to you about their interaction with police. White people in America, this is data tells us this. They are not subject to the same biases we are. But they refuse to accept that biases exist. And ultimately, I can't indict you for your experiences. But if you refuse to see that mine may be different and that they still have a validity that you don't have to kind of necessarily agree with. When I was 8 years old, I got pulled over. 8 years old in Los Angeles. I grew up here. I had no idea if police were good or bad. I was a kid. I was playing. A police pulled us over. Me and my friend were coming from getting free lunch at school. He pulled us over. He made us put our hands on the car, and he asked us what a guy in our neighborhood was. And I'm like, I don't know. And back the cars used to run hot, and I was like, man, the car has hurt my hand. He looked at me. He said, he pulled a gun out. He said, if you move your hand off this car again, I'm gonna blow your head off. Now I'm 8 years old. That is the vantage point I will always remember. You have a 10-year-old boy in Chicago. He gets chained up. He's handcuffed and peeing on himself. We make the monsters we start to be afraid of. I grew up in Los Angeles. Los Angeles up until 2012 or 2011 was under a federal moratorium because they were so brutal. The Sheriff Block and his undersheriff are in jail right now for corruption. So that was my experience. That I can tell you, I've had more bad interactions than good. If you grew up in Los Angeles, they recruited people from the South to come take care of their problem. That's not me. That's history. That happened. And so how am I supposed to have a different vantage point when I see the exact same thing when I'm 8 years old and that happens to me, and I look on news and I see a 10-year-old boy going through the same thing I went through. And then you read me this report, and it tells me basically that the same things that were going on then are going on now.
This is a very important book. Thank you, man.
Thank you, man.